It's kind of wild, right? Like life doesn't come with one of those instruction booklets, We're all just kind of figuring it out as we go, bumping into things, learning as we go.
Absolutely. And, you hit those moments where you think you've got a handle on things, then bam, life throws a curveball.
Exactly. So that's exactly why we're diving into this whole idea of how to human today. And no, we're not talking about some rigid rule book. It's more about getting to the heart of those essential skills, those perspectives that actually help us navigate this whole being human experience. And for this deep dive, we're focusing on part two, balance and adaptability.
Yeah, think of this as your crash course. We've been poring over some super insightful material, and we're here to break down the key takeaways, especially when it comes to finding that balance and learning to adapt. Because, let's face it, life is anything but static.
Totally. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, what does how to human even mean? Our sources seem to agree it's not about striving for some unattainable perfection. It's definitely not about sticking to a plan no matter what. It's more about recognizing those core skills, those fundamental mindsets, and honestly, those ways of looking at the world that help us build a life that feels, both meaningful and something we can actually sustain. It's about embracing this truth, that being human means we're constantly juggling different needs. We crave order, but we also absolutely need flexibility. We yearn for connection, but we also really value our independence. And we might hope for certainty, but as we all know, life rarely unfolds in a perfectly predictable way.
You hit the nail on the head. We're often told to focus on achievements, on productivity, on checking things off the list. But what about that inner sense of harmony? About finding equilibrium within ourselves? We might gain knowledge, sure, but what about real wisdom, that deeper understanding of how to actually live? We're often given instructions, but the why behind them, that gets lost sometimes.
I feel that. It's like life is this constant balancing act, right? And without some kind of internal compass, it's easy to get thrown off course. You might cling to routines so tightly that even the smallest changes feel like a major upheaval, or you might go the opposite route. So spontaneous that you never feel like you're making any real progress towards what you actually want. It's like you're either seeking approval from everyone around you or pushing people away in an attempt to be fiercely independent. And you're either dwelling on the past or constantly chasing some idealized future version of yourself.
Right. Like you're stuck in one gear.
Yeah.
So what we want to do today is give you some practical insights, some real tools you can use. We're going beyond the surface level to explore how balance, effective communication, but we'll save that for another deep dive, learning from our mistakes, and building resilience can all contribute to a more fulfilling life. We're talking deeper relationships, more satisfying career, just overall well-being.
Okay, so let's dig into this dynamic duo, balance and adaptability. What we're seeing in the material is that these aren't just two isolated skills, they're intertwined. Each one supports the other. Both are essential for navigating the ups and downs that life inevitably brings.
Perfectly put. When you get down to it, balance is about creating a sense of stability amidst, let's be honest, the chaos of competing priorities and demands that are constantly pulling us in different directions. Think about it. We're juggling work and rest, ambition and contentment, that need for personal space, and that desire for connection. We're trying to make sense of things logically while acknowledging our emotions. We crave structure, but we also need a little bit of unpredictability to keep things interesting. It's about finding that sweet spot where you're not so rigid that you break under pressure, but you're not so free-flowing that you lose your sense of direction.
And adaptability, then, is that willingness to shift gears, to adjust your approach, your mindset, even your plans when things, well, don't go according to plan. And let's be real, life rarely goes according to plan. So, the more adaptable we are, the better we can handle those unexpected twists and turns without feeling completely thrown off course. It's about being able to navigate change while staying true to yourself.
What's fascinating is how we can see these concepts at play in our everyday lives. Think about it. Someone who sets clear boundaries between work and personal time, they're working on balance. That student who tweaks their study habits when they encounter a new kind of exam, that's adaptability in action. A leader who can stand by their decisions while being open to feedback, that's wisdom born from balance and adaptability. This dance between finding equilibrium and knowing when to adjust is so crucial to a life that feels both grounded and fulfilling.
Okay, so we know life can get overwhelming, but let's really unpack this.
Mm.
Why are balance and adaptability so important in helping us navigate that feeling of being overwhelmed, of feeling stuck?
Well, imagine life without balance.
Yeah.
Like we said earlier, things quickly become unsustainable. You become this tightly wound spring that's just waiting to snap, too rigid, and you can't handle even the smallest deviations from your routine. On the flip side, Too much spontaneity,
Yeah.
no structure whatsoever, and you end up feeling scattered like you're putting in a ton of effort, but not really getting anywhere. And if you lack adaptability, well, every unexpected challenge becomes this huge hurdle. You're constantly getting knocked down.
It's like you need that springiness, that resilience to bounce back.
Right, exactly. And adaptability isn't just about bouncing back. It's about using those unexpected shifts to your advantage, finding opportunity in the unexpected. Balance gives you that firm footing so you can weather the storm without getting swept away. Without these skills, you might feel stuck, unable to move forward. Someone who resists change might really struggle with something like a new job or a shift in a relationship, and someone who lacks balance might feel pulled in a million directions, totally burnt out. Or they might swing to the other extreme, feeling apathetic and unfulfilled because they're not engaged with anything. Cultivating both balance and adaptability builds that inner confidence to handle whatever life throws at you.
Okay, so this all makes sense, but how do we actually do it? How do we cultivate more balance, become more adaptable in our daily lives? What are some real concrete steps we can take?
When it comes to balance, it starts with taking a good, honest look at yourself. Where are you feeling off kilter? Where do you feel that constant friction? For example, if you're always checking work emails late at night, that's a sign you might need stronger boundaries around your work hours. If you shy away from anything outside your routine, maybe try stepping outside that comfort zone, but in baby steps. Try a new route to work. Pick up a hobby you'd never considered before. Chat with someone new.
So, like creating little low-stakes opportunities to practice being flexible.
Exactly. You get used to adjusting your expectations. Now, if you're working on adaptability, you've got to challenge those rigid thought patterns. Instead of seeing a setback as a failure, try to see it as a learning experience. What can you learn from it? How can you adjust your approach? One thing our sources talk about is the power of asking, what if? Instead of focusing on all the things that could go wrong, try asking, what if this turns out even better than I could have imagined? And cultivating what's called a growth mindset, believing that you can actually develop your abilities and intelligence through effort and perseverance, makes adapting to new challenges feel exciting, like an opportunity for growth instead of a threat.
I love that. You're turning potential obstacles into opportunities to learn and explore.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And building flexibility into your routine, that can be huge for both balance and adaptability. Structure is good. To-do lists, goals, that's all important. But make sure you build in some unstructured time, space for spontaneity. Don't overschedule yourself. Learn to recognize when it's crucial to stick to the plan and when it's okay, even beneficial, to deviate and see where things take you. Mindfulness practices, journaling, even just taking a few minutes throughout the day to check in with yourself, those can give you some real insight into whether your current way of living is actually serving you.
This is all great stuff, but I'm sure some people listening are thinking, okay, but how do I break out of those old patterns? I always seem to fall back into the same habits. What are some of those common roadblocks people hit when they're trying to build balance and adaptability, and how can they get past them?
One of the biggest hurdles to balance is that all or nothing thinking. It's that feeling that if you can't achieve some perfect state of balance, then why even bother? But here's the thing. Balance isn't a destination. It's a process. It's ongoing. You're constantly making little adjustments. So instead of aiming for some unrealistic ideal, focus on those small, incremental changes that move you towards greater harmony.
So it's more about consistency over time, not perfection in this moment.
Exactly. And when it comes to adaptability, fear is a huge factor. Fear of the unknown, fear of that discomfort that comes with change. The best way to overcome that is to expose yourself to change in small, manageable doses. Like we talked about earlier, those baby steps. If you're a creature of habit, try incorporating one new thing into your weekend routine each month. If you always order the same thing at your favorite restaurant, branch out and try something different. These small things help you get used to that feeling of uncertainty and build confidence in your ability to handle new situations.
Like dipping your toes in the water before jumping in the deep end.
Exactly. Another tricky thing, and this might sound counterintuitive, is when people try to be adaptable and they go overboard, they think it means ditching all structure and embracing total chaos. But real adaptability isn't about throwing everything out the window. It's about knowing when and how to adjust your plans and routines based on new information or circumstances. It's finding that sweet spot between consistency, which gives you a sense of stability, and flexibility, which lets you respond to those inevitable curveballs.
I love that. So it's not one or the other. It's about finding that balance between the two. Can you give us a few real-world examples just to really bring these concepts to life?
Absolutely. Think about elite athletes. They have these crazy intense training schedules, but they also understand the importance of balancing that hard work with rest and recovery. They know if they push themselves too hard without enough rest, they'll burn out or get injured. And they have to be super adaptable, constantly adjusting their game plan based on their opponent, the conditions on the field, even unexpected things that happen during competition. Too rigid, and they'll crumble under pressure.
Yeah.
Too loosey-goosey, and they'll never reach their full potential.
That's such a good analogy. The structure of their training program gives them that solid foundation, but it's their adaptability that lets them perform at their best, no matter what's thrown at them.
Exactly. And then think about leadership in the business world. Good leaders have a vision, a strategic plan, but they also need the humility and adaptability to know when they need to change course based on new information or a changing market. Think about Blockbuster refusing to adapt to streaming. That's a classic example of what happens when you can't adapt. Then you have companies like Netflix who saw the shift and completely changed their business model. That's why they're thriving.
What about on a more personal level? Can you give us an example of how this might play out in someone's everyday life?
Absolutely. Imagine someone going through a big career change or facing something unexpected like a health issue or a major personal loss. The people who approach these challenges with an open mind, who are willing to adjust their expectations and plans, they tend to be incredibly resilient. They find new ways forward. The people who resist the change, who see it as a negative setback, they have a much harder time. It comes down to your perspective. Do you see a roadblock or do you see a detour?
Those examples really paint a clear picture of how balance and adaptability show up in different areas of life. So for our listeners, what are some questions they can ask themselves to figure out where they stand with these skills?
That's so important. Start by asking yourself,
Mhm.
are there areas of your life where you feel constantly overwhelmed or stuck? Could those feelings be a sign that something's out of balance?
And how do you usually react when things don't go according to plan? When something unexpected happens, do you embrace it, resist it, or does it send you into a spiral of anxiety?
Now think about action steps. Well, it's one small change you can make today or this week to create a little more balance in your routine. It doesn't have to be huge, just a small step in the right direction.
Looking back, can you think of a time when you successfully navigated a new or unexpected situation? What did that teach you about your own resilience? What helped you get through it, even if you weren't aware of it at the time?
And finally, think about your goals. Do you have a plan for achieving them? That structure is crucial. But does your plan allow for some flexibility? What happens if things change? Can you adapt?
Those are some really great questions that can give our listeners a lot to think about. So, as we wrap up, what's the one big takeaway we want people to remember?
The big takeaway, and it's something that comes up again and again in material we've looked at, is that balance isn't static. It's not about finding a fixed point and staying there. It's about constant adjustment, about recalibrating as you move through life.
It's like a moving target, right? It's constantly evolving.
Exactly. It's responding to the new challenges and opportunities that life throws at you. And that brings us to the final piece of wisdom. Living a fulfilling life isn't about avoiding those bumps in the road or trying to prevent the unexpected from happening. It's about knowing when to stand firm, when to stay true to your values, and when to be flexible, to change your approach and your perspective as needed.
So for everyone listening, take a moment to reflect on that interplay between your inner stability, what grounds you, and how you respond to the ever-changing world around you. How can you cultivate both that resilience and that flexibility? Because it seems like that's the key to navigating this whole being human thing. That's what leads to a more resilient, more meaningful, more satisfying life.